Welcome back, everybody, to the Hoosier Huddle podcast. My name is Matt St. Charles. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to visit us at HoosierHuddle.com, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and sign up for a membership through the website to keep up with all of our work through the rest of this basketball season, which is actually shaping up to be somewhat of an exciting one. After this past 2 weeks or so, splitting this road trip out to the West Coast, beating Purdue, the Hoosiers now find themselves in a good spot heading forward. So if you want to keep up with all of that, make sure to follow us. So looking back just to last night, we talked about last week how the Purdue win kind of sets you up with your first quad one win, right? Your signature win of the season. And you're headed out to the West Coast. And in reality, you need a split. You want to win 2 games, right? But it's 2 quad one opportunities out there in LA. You had just gotten one against Purdue. So you're thinking if you can split, you're in a good spot going forward in Big Ten play. So we'll start with the most recent result, obviously, out at USC last night. And Indiana falls 81-75. Now, on paper, not a great result, but there's a lot of context to this game I feel really, really matters. The obvious one is, of course, on Saturday you played a double overtime game against a tough UCLA team coached by Mick Cronin that for, I'd say, the majority of the first half played some really tough defense, right? Nothing was easy for that Indiana team. Then you should close it out down the stretch, but you don't. You end up in overtime. You end up in double overtime. So out on the West Coast, fatigue is obviously a factor. Fatigue has been a factor for this team, regardless of where they play, right? But when this team goes to double overtime and then a couple of days later they're playing another quad one game, it's going to be hard to put 40 minutes together, right? So I think to lose by 6, I thought it was a great effort, right? Obviously not the result you want, but it could be worse. Another thing that really mattered in this game, USC is still adding a couple guys back into their rotation, right? So not a lot of film, I would say, not a lot of knowledge about these guys. So Cam Woods, who had a big game last night for USC, played all 40 minutes and scored 18 points, just got picked up in mid-December. He was at RMU last year, was the Horizon League tournament MVP, Horizon League all-league second team. He's in his 6th year of college basketball. This is a guy you haven't seen much of, and then all of a sudden he goes off for 18 points. I don't want to say goes off, but he has a great game, right? And then on top of that, Elijah Arenas, Gilbert Arenas' kid, is just getting back from this car accident that he had in August. Just getting back into the lineup. I think he was a 5-star recruit. I don't want to say, but he was a very good recruit out of high school. And he's just getting back into it. You saw late in that game a lot of signs of fatigue from him because I think he played like his 6th game or something like that. So he's a stud. And on top of that, Chad Baker-Mazara, who's older than me, he's 26 years old, for a good chunk of that game was their offense, he started 3 for 3 or something like that for 7 points. And then he ends 3 for 10, but he plays 20 minutes when he gets hurt after Sam Alexis blocks him. And that kind of allows Elijah Arenas to step into that role. Like Chad Baker-Mazara was taking between the legs step back threes, like things that he had never done at Auburn. So he's the USC offensive identity, right? And then you kind of get to replace him with Elijah Arenas, who ends up with 29 points and 6 rebounds. So there's a lot of just unknown in that game that ended up being a big, big factor. You kind of saw the fatigue from Indiana early. USC started 7 of 7 from the field. And it's not a hole you want to dig yourself into on the road in your second straight game on the West Coast. So, that's not great. And then offensively, the only guy going for Indiana was Lamar Wilkerson, who ends up with 33 points, shoots 11 of 20 from the field, and 5 of 12 from 3, which is all great, right? You love when you get that from Lamar Wilkerson. But Nick Dorn goes 2 for 12. Haven't seen that. He hasn't had that much volume and been that off this season. Tucker DeVries is 1 for 9. We'll get into that a little bit. Reed Bailey is 2 for 6 from the field. Not what you want to see from your center, right? And then, you're still trying to work Conway back in, plays 10 minutes, but with some foul trouble, he's closing the game all of a sudden in his first game back, which I wouldn't prefer that as a coach. So that was definitely an interesting look. So there's a lot of things that I've mentioned with this fatigue, but also just the personnel of this Indiana team, right? They're not the biggest team in the world. That's kind of their identity. They, DeVries wants to get out and run and all this kind of stuff. Against a team like USC, who's got Ezra Asar, who on the broadcast they said he doesn't even want to play football. He doesn't want to play basketball. He wants to be a tight end. So he's already looking for an opportunity in the NFL. He's just a tank. And then Gabe Dines, who I don't even know how tall he is, but towered over everybody for Indiana. He ends up with 3 offensive rebounds, 7 total rebounds. You lose the rebounding battle 40-25. Not great. You still somehow get 9 more field goal attempts than USC, despite the rebounding. And you still lose. I mean, looking at where USC was offensively in the first half, they shot 37% from the field and 18% from 3. And Indiana was losing at halftime, 35-30. If you're holding a team to that poor shooting and you find a way to be losing, not a great trip. Now, I understand I've mentioned all these things. It's a tough spot to be in, especially when you have a lot of guys not playing well. But them not playing well is a product of why a team from Indiana has to go out to Los Angeles to play 2 games in the Big Ten. But that's a whole other story. Tucker DeVries, I saw a lot in the UCLA game about how he kind of reinvented himself, took on this different sort of role, almost like a Jason Tatum type when the Celtics won the finals, like playing offense or playing point guard on offense and then going down on the other end and guarding one of the forwards. right? So he's really passing up opportunities offensively to get other guys going. And that's what the UCLA game called for, right? Dorn was hot. Wilkerson got hot down the stretch. Right? That's just what the UCLA game needed. But last night, this team needed a secondary scorer next to Wilkerson, right? Dorn has been able to fill that role at an absurd clip in the last 4 or 5 games, whatever it is. Last night, Indiana needed Tucker DeVries to step up and shoulder some of the offensive load next to Wilkerson. And I think he took 1 field goal in the first half or 2. I can't remember. And he ends up 1 of 9 from the field, 1 of 8 from 3. I'm not saying results-wise, but that was what Nick Dorn used to do and still does to a certain extent. Indiana doesn't need you to be Nick Dorn. Indiana needs you to be Tucker DeVries, who can facilitate offense and score when he needs to. But there was a lot of times he wouldn't even look at the rim. And that's not what you want from one of your 2 best offensive players. I look at the 3-pointer he hit kind of early in the second half, and you saw the bench reaction. They were like going crazy happy for him that he had made a shot. And I love the reaction from the bench, right? But that's not how we want them to react when our best player or second best player hits 1 shot. Like, it shouldn't be that massive. But I like to think that there's no doubt in my mind DeVries will sort of find it again offensively and start to be a little bit more aggressive. I think a lot of this team could just use a little bit more offensive aggression. And Wilkerson was the only guy doing that last night. Dorn, I thought, showed some stuff in the UCLA game in terms of getting to the rim. When people close out on him, he's able to attack the top foot and get to the basket, and he made some big plays in the UCLA game doing that. But last night, reverted to the 2 of 12 from 3, or reverted to shooting only 3s. And, when it's not falling from outside, he wasn't able to bring much else to the table. So, yeah, Indiana gets down, I think, as much as 14 late in that game. Reed Bailey in foul trouble. Sam Alexis in foul trouble. Nick Dorn in foul trouble. Wilkerson kind of in foul trouble. They just kept trying to throw that punch, and they would get it to 4, they would get it to 5, or something like that. And then I think they got it to 4, and Elijah Arenas hit the 2 threes, and I think Cam Woods had a layup. And it went back up to 12. And then Alexis fouled out. Or sorry, Dorn hits the 3 to cut it back down to 8. And then he has an opportunity to cut it to 5, misses. And then Alexis fouls out. Then we get Tucker DeVries drives, kicks to Sam Alexis for a dunk. And then you have that out of bounds call that Darren DeVries challenges. That's a tough call to make in that spot. Initially, you kind of agree with Tucker DeVries that it went off Elijah Arenas' knee. On TV, I thought the refs handled it well. I do think it ended up off of Tucker DeVries' finger. But again, the call on the floor was USC basketball, I didn't think there was enough to overturn that. So is what it is. And then Peyton Connerway is found his groove for a little bit, was getting to the rim, got the one layup. USC was just making their free throws. And then when Connerway got to the rim the second time with about 15 seconds left, I just think you would usually see Connerway get to the other side of the rim. And I just think there was a lot of moments in that game where he just didn't look all the way comfortable. So I get it, I've heard it might be a high ankle sprain, whatever it is. That's not an easy thing to come back from, but just trying to get him back into rhythm. And I would think usually he would get to the other side of the rim. So again, a tough position to be in for Indiana out on the West Coast off of a double OT game. Like, you just saw some of the fatigue in those guys more than you usually do, right? As I mentioned, fatigue has been a thing with this team. And it's just not something you can avoid in this kind of situation. And then again, USC is just such a big team. The rebounding margin, you'd like to see a little bit more gang rebounding. I don't want to use the word effort because, I didn't think effort was an issue at all. It's just it's a tough matchup to rebound against. So I thought it was a good effort from the team. Unfortunately, USC is not a world beater, but, it would have been a quad one win for a reason. So definitely a tough pill to swallow. But when you go back and look at the UCLA game, you're kind of vindicated, right? You got the split on the West Coast trip, and USC wasn't a must-win game anymore. But going back to the UCLA game, coming off the Purdue win, I thought was another signature win for this team. When you look at sustaining success in Big Ten play, and look, this just all goes back to Nick Dorn once again. A lot of big shots that he hit in this game. And just, again, being able to space the floor for this offense in a way that Peyton Connerway couldn't provide volume-wise. Like, he's not going to shoot as many threes as Nick Dorn. And so having Nick Dorn on the floor alongside Enright, who's, again, not a volume shooter, gives you a lot more opportunity. And I just thought that this was a gutty win all around. Obviously you can point to the end of regulation, how that game got to overtime. Not my favorite basketball Indiana's played, but once you get into overtime and UCLA kind of takes control, from then on, Indiana threw that counterpunch. And I thought down the stretch in regulation and through both overtimes, Lamar Wilkerson was vital to that win. And not in the same way that he was against USC, where he was really, really hot from three. Because against UCLA, he went 3 of 11 from three. But there was a concerted effort from him in the half court or in transition to get to the rim. And once he made that decision to just go to the basket over and over and over again, that's when the switch flipped for Indiana. And everything became so easy offensively. But wanting to look at, I mentioned UCLA played some really, really good defense for the first, I'd say 15 minutes or so of that game. And then once we got into the second half, the defense kind of went out the door for UCLA. One thing is, this is kind of, I mentioned this last week, but Connor Enright, for all of his limitations, whether they be physical or mental offensively, or just why would I shoot when Lamar Wilkerson could shoot, right? That kind of thing. You can have Connor Enright on the floor and switch every pick and roll, because he was phenomenal on Bilodeau, who's a good player. He was amazing fronting the post on Bilodeau, making everything difficult. He may have drawn an offensive foul, I can't remember. But 5.7 assists on top of all that defense. He can, despite his size, he can guard all 5 positions on the floor. And, usually you would see a team decide that you're not going to switch that, right? We're going to hedge it really hard, or we're going to play drop coverage or something like that. But against Donovan Dent, right, drop coverage is tough. So just switch. Enright get on Bilodeau, and for a little while there, it felt like they were hunting that matchup with Bilodeau and Enright. And then eventually they were like, this is not working. We need to find something else. And that's kind of when Dent got going and that kind of thing. I thought that was Reed Bailey's best game in an Indiana uniform. 24 points, 12 of 13 at the free throw line. Hit some big ones down the stretch. 6 rebounds, 5 assists, and a block. That was a great game. And it just, when Sam Alexis and Reed Bailey are both really good, it puts this team in some really good spots. He was huge in the dunker spot, right, catching lobs. When DeVries or Sisley or whoever it is in the short roll, he was big in that spot. And then finishing at the rim, and then the and one at the foul line was really, really big stuff from him. And I thought, Rutgers was a great game for Sam Alexis. Purdue was a great game for Reed. And I thought they both were really good in this game in the stretches that they played. Obviously, Bailey is getting most of the love, but I thought they both played really, really well. And then I talked about Dorn kind of expanding his game a little bit, getting to the rim. Only took 3 shots inside the arc, made 2 of them, but he was driving more often, not as much as you'd like, but driving, kicking. Didn't end up with any assists, but you penetrate the defense, get the ball moving. I thought he was really good in that. I think one of the most important takeaways from this game is the assist rate of this team, and we know the assist rate has been high all season. This team loves to share the ball, that kind of thing. They started with their first 16 field goals coming off of assists, and they ended 22 of 28. So basically 80% of their field goals came off of assists. And that's the type of team that down the stretch of a close game is able to pull it out, because they don't care who does it, right? They're just swinging the ball. I feel like we have to talk about the end of that game in regulation, because that game should have been put away multiple times. But there's a tendency with this team to hunt the kill shot and hunt it kind of to a detriment. There was one shot I wrote down. Indiana's up 10 with 1:50 to go. Wilkerson had just hit a three, right? Great. Wilkerson catches the ball in the corner. He's already pretty deep in the corner, and he takes a one dribble sidestep deeper into the corner three with 14 seconds on the shot clock. I think just before that, Dorn had taken what I didn't think was a great three. And just wanting that big shot, that dagger, right? But hunting it to an extent where you're taking bad shots and you have time to keep the ball moving and get a great shot that really puts the game away, I think hurt this team a little bit in that game. Secondly, whatever happened in the full court trap with UCLA, obviously this was a problem for Purdue too, because they lost the game in a similar fashion. Indiana was able to pull it out. But once UCLA put that full court press on, Indiana had a hard time getting the ball across half court. Turned it over, I think I want to say 3 times, twice for layups. Struggled to finish possessions on the offensive glass. Like I think of Donovan Dent driving to the rim, just throwing it off because he's in the air and then putting it back up. Especially late in those games, there was somebody shot a free throw for UCLA and they got an offensive rebound out of a foul. Like, those are not opportunities you can give up. So I think that has to improve down the stretch. Can't turn the ball over as much. And then I thought free throws were fine for the most part. You'd like to see Wilkerson hit both of those on the 1-and-1 he had late in that game. Reed missed one. I'm not going to harp too much on Reed Bailey because he was 12 of 13 at the line, but missed one to kind of leave the door open in overtime. And then can't say enough about Trent Sisley. With all the foul trouble Indiana was in once again, with Connor Enright fouling out, Reed Bailey fouling out, Josiah Miles fouling out, that freshman Trent Sisley found himself in a Big Ten game in overtime. And I thought he made the most of it. When somebody drove to the rim, I think on that last possession is the main example, obviously, that comes to mind. But he's a great cutter. He has a great sense of when to cut, angles, that kind of thing. But when Tucker drove to the rim on that last possession of double overtime, Trent Sisley was the beneficiary because he cut off the back, got a layup, didn't get a foul call, and missed, and it went out of bounds, gave Indiana a chance. Mick Cronin was upset about how that replay went down, but that's a whole other thing. Indiana gets the ball back, and I thought it was a great baseline out of bounds play, whether it was designed that way or Trent Sisley, again, just basketball instincts, goes to screen for Dorn on the left elbow as Dorn's going out to the right wing. And UCLA switches, and Sisley seals Donovan Dent off just enough to slip to the rim. DeVries makes a good pass on time and on target, and Dent is in bad position and has to get his hand in there and commits a foul. And we went 1 of 2 from the line on that possession, but Trent Sisley shot 6 field goals in his 6 free throws, in his 14 minutes in the game. and he made the one that really mattered. So, backing up the Purdue win with that win over UCLA for another quad one win, again, puts you in a great spot, and USC is a little easier to swallow because of it. So now you're in a great spot coming home. I keep seeing this tweet from Trey Knows Ball about, what Indiana has to do going down the stretch to make the NCAA tournament, and I agree totally with it. And first on that list is beat Wisconsin, beat Oregon. And that's what you have in the next week. So we're going to look into those games just a little bit. So Wisconsin, obviously, is no gimme, right? This is a team that's very similar to Indiana. They're performing better in Big Ten play, sitting at 8-3, but all the analytics, all the advanced stats, everything will tell you that these teams are very, very similar. So Wisconsin, 39th in KenPom, Indiana 34th. But Wisconsin's sitting at 8-3 in the Big Ten, and Indiana's 6-6. So this would be Wisconsin also 42 in the net, so this would be a quad 2 opportunity for Indiana, but still. KenPom offensive rating, Wisconsin is 121.6. Indiana's 121.7. So very, very similar. Defense, Wisconsin 102.9. Indiana 101.1. So Indiana on advanced analytics paper is a slightly better team, but in actual record, Wisconsin is the better team at the moment. Wisconsin's last loss was USC at home. Indiana, obviously, last night in LA loses. So a couple of things I noted with this Wisconsin team. Number one, free throw rate. Offensively, this is a team that gets to the foul line a lot. They're also pretty guard-centric with Nick Boyd and John Blackwell using – Nick Boyd is 54th in the country out of 2,300 players in usage rate. So these are guys, along with Austin Rapp and Nolan Winter, who like to get in the paint, like to draw fouls, get to the foul line. And, you faced a similar team in USC last night in terms of physicality, getting to the line. USC is the best team in the Big Ten in free throw rate offensively at almost 43%. So defend without fouling, which has been so tough for this team, especially when you consider their depth or lack thereof. But you cannot have a game where Nick Dorn, Lamar Wilkerson, Tucker DeVries, both of the bigs are in foul trouble. That's going to hurt you in this game. And that's how Wisconsin will shoot almost 30 free throws. That's just not something you can have on Saturday in Assembly Hall. Number two, this is a team, I know Darren DeVries likes to get up and down and push the pace, right, attacking a fractured defense. Wisconsin likes to do it, and they've done it more effectively than Indiana so far this season. Wisconsin 70th in tempo, Indiana 198th. Wisconsin's getting almost 70 possessions a game. So that's going to be a big thing as to how this game plays out. Is if Indiana wants to run with Wisconsin, which they will tell you they're comfortable doing, but they shoot like they did last night against USC, it's not going to be a great result. Now, you could say that about any game, but Wisconsin is a slightly above average three-point shooting team. So if they get way more possessions than you and hit more threes than you, that's how it's going to play out. But this is a must-win game, so that cannot happen. Is again another team that loves to shoot three, as I kind of mentioned. 51% of their shots come from behind the arc, which is 11th in the country. Indiana, 52% of their shots come from behind the arc, which is 8th in the country. So same thing kind of goes to that point I just said. Like, the bats have to be going in this game. Dorn can't shoot 2 for 12, right? Wilkerson can't go 3 for 11. Tucker DeVries has to shoot the ball and be efficient, right? He can't go 1 of 9 from the field and 1 of 8 from 3. He has to look at the rim and be aggressive trying to score the ball. A positive for this one, Wisconsin does not force turnovers, which at different points of the season for Indiana has been an issue, turning the ball over. Wisconsin is 316th in the country in turnover percentage, 308th in steal percentage. So that allows Indiana, to an extent, to sort of play freely. I don't want to give them too much leash here, but not everything will require so much thought when it comes to not turning the ball over, because Wisconsin's not a kind of run and gun defense that's trying to force those. So Indiana will have a bit of wiggle room to kind of play freely and be a bit aggressive with some of their passes, splitting double teams, whatever it is, things like that. And then Wisconsin is not a team that offensive rebounds the ball very well. 226 in the country at under 30% in offensive rebound possession. But defensively, they don't give up a lot of offensive rebounds. So you have to be effective, which is, again, bats have to be going. You have to make your first opportunity each trip down, because they're not going to give you another one. 15th in the country in offensive rebound percentage allowed. So this game, like I said over and over again, like, the horses have to go in this game if Indiana wants to win. You can't survive a 2 for 12 Dorn, a 3 for 11 DeVries, anything like that. Guys have to be going in this one. Then looking ahead to next week against Oregon, Monday in Assembly Hall. I have a lot of respect for Dana Altman and some of the tourney runs he's gone on. This is not Dana Altman's best team by far. So this is a must-win game for Indiana. This is, if you drop this game to a team that's 105 in KenPom, 115 in net, 8-14 overall, 1-10 in the Big Ten, and is currently on an 8-game losing streak with Purdue on Saturday. The season's probably not heading in the right direction. So a couple just quick things on Oregon. As I said, not a lot should go into this game, but 279th in tempo, 65.3 possessions per game. They've got the 7-footer and Nate Biddle that they like to play through, 95th in the country in usage rate. They want to slow the game down. They understand most teams in the country, every team in the Big Ten, is more talented than them. They want to value their possessions, slow the game down, play through the big guy. So if Alexis or Reed Bailey's in foul trouble, it's going to be a long night unless Connor Enright wants to get in there for 40 minutes again and guard the big. 254th in offensive turnover percentage. This is where I think Tatum Connerway can find a little room here again, and find some rhythm offensively. He's great on the ball, attacking the ball, right? Forcing turnovers, kind of those quick twitch steals. I think if he can get that going on the defensive end, get some open layups going in transition on offense, I think you'll start to see the flow come back for him. And I think that'd be beneficial for this Indiana team. Oregon, 361st in defensive free throw rate. There are, I believe, 365 teams in the country in Division I. And a Big Ten team is 361st in defensive free throw rate. They're going to foul you. They just are. So I mentioned Nick Dorn attacking closeouts. Connerway, again, great opportunity to get to the free throw line. Wilkerson has been really aggressive getting downhill the last two games. Oregon will foul you, and you can spend 25 minutes plus of this game in the bonus. So take advantage of that. As Oregon wants to slow the game down, speed it up, and use that time at the free throw line to get rest. I think that would be big for this team. As I mentioned, fatigue has been an issue. But a couple of things of note for Oregon. 66th in the country in defensive block rate. You know, I mentioned, obviously, the big guy. Attacking and looking to get fouled, but, you know, walking that tightrope between calculated aggression and just getting your shot swatted. So being careful of that, I think when you're able to get that kind of penetration, it leaves Sam Alexis and Reed Bailey open in the dunker spot, which could set them up for big games, assuming they're not in foul trouble. And then 57th in offensive rebound rate, 35%. Was an issue against USC last night. You have to gang rebound. If you want to play with Bailey and Alexis rotating, fine. Everybody has to be in there rebounding, finishing possessions on the defensive end. I think those are kind of the keys to this game to look out for. Really excited. I will be in Assembly Hall Saturday for Wisconsin. It's an exciting time for Indiana basketball. Obviously, the main focus is on them now. So this is two games that you should win coming back from LA. And you win two games in front of the home crowd, they could really, really be behind you going into Illinois, Purdue in back-to-back games, although on the road. Michigan State coming into the building. Everyone could really, really be behind you with these games, and I think they matter. So split the road trip. You're in a decent spot. Win these two games. You're in a pretty good spot. So we will see how it all plays out. Thank you all so much for watching the Hoosier Huddle podcast. My name is Matt St. Charles, and I'll see you all next week.